Hello and welcome to Module 5 in our series SDL2 with C++. In today's session, we're going to begin putting in code for our game War of the Easter Bunnies. To give you a visual of what our final game will look like, this is what it is. We have our defender bunny there on the left, trying to eliminate the enemy bunnies. Coming to the code we need to write today, write a function to initialize the video subsystem of the SDL library. Create a window of that size. Create the rendering context for the window. Before we proceed, may I ask that you leave a like on this video, and if you're enjoying the series, then do subscribe to the channel. It goes a long way in promoting the channel. It means a lot to me as well and keeps me motivated to create more content like this. Thank you. Now back to the project. To begin, in your Windows search bar, type in VIS. Make sure it's Visual Studio 2022 that you see and not Visual Studio Code, if you have both, that is. And then in the list, you should see your project. Click once on the project name to open it up. Now I already have mine opened here. We're going to begin with a few hash include statements. Hash include, and that will be struct.h. We will create this header file shortly. Similarly, hash include defs.h. Again, we'll create this shortly. Then hash include for input output operations IO stream. And then hash include the header file of the SDL library. So that's SDL.h. Okay, now to create these two header files, right click on the project folder, click add, click new item, click on the header file, change the name to struct.h, click add. Now what does pragma once mean? So here we're going to include the header file for the SDL library again, but because we've got that statement pragma once, which is put automatically there, you can see what will happen is, remember we've included the header file here as well, but the compiler will ensure that this header file is included only once per compilation, right? And thus we avoid compilation errors. Now into this file, we'll put a type def statement to give the type struct a new name. And the members of this structure are going to be our SDL renderer type variable, which will be a pointer to a structure of SDL renderer type. Similarly, SDL window type variable window. Okay, and the new name we're going to give this type struct is app, right? So we will use this in our code instead of using the struct type, right? That's all for this header file. The next header file, again right click, click add, new item, make sure header file is highlighted there. Change the name to defs.h. Now in this one, we're not going to include the SDL library header file. This is just for hash defined statements to define our screen width and screen height. That's all. Now come back to the main.cpp file and we'll put in some variables here. App type app, and we'll put in our function now. So this function is not going to return anything, so that's a void. Name of the function is initialize. You can call it whatever you like, and no parameters coming in, so void. Within this function, we'll have a win flag and set that to 0. We will use that when using our SDL create window function, and similarly int render flag, which we will initialize to SDL renderer accelerated. We will use this when creating our rendering context. Okay. Now we will call SDL init, and we've got to check for success or failure of that function. So if SDL init, remember we are initializing our video subsystem. So SDL init video, if this returns a value that is less than 0, then we display a message. So right, and then of course exit failure to exit the program. Okay, if SDL init succeeds, we can go ahead and create our window. We'll use the variable we defined in our struct.h, so that's app.window equal to SDL create window. You can pick it up from the list and then provide the arguments, the title, the position, SDL window pos undefined for both the x and y coordinates. Remember, these represent the top left hand corner of the window. Right? We need to provide dimensions, width and height. So screen width and then screen height. And then our flag. So that value is 0, which means that we're not really sending in any flags here. Right? Now to check if that window is successfully created or not. So if not app.window, which means we have a null there, then we need a message again. So we just copy those 2 lines and paste them here and change the message. Right? If the window is successfully created, then we proceed to creating the rendering context. And again, we use app.renderer equal to the function we call is SDL create renderer. Pass in the window -1, indicating that the first available driver should be initialized, and then our render flag. Right, so that's defined here. This program is therefore using hardware acceleration. Check if the rendering context is created successfully or not. So if not app.renderer, then a message. So we can just copy this again, right, and then paste it here and change the message. Right, and that's all for this function. Going back, the next function, right, a function that will pull events from the queue and take appropriate action depending on the type of event that has occurred. So let's now go back to our code and create that function. So here we'll call that get input. It's not going to return anything, so void get input, no parameters, so void. And in this function we'll have our SDL event type variable. And then we'll have a while loop which will run as long as there are events in the queue. So we'll call SDL pull event to check and pull events from the queue. To SDL pull event, we pass in the address of our SDL event type variable. Within the while loop, we'll have a switch construct, and we will evaluate the type member of that SDL event type variable event. The only event we're checking for here is SDL quit, keeping it simple for this program. So case SDL quit. What we'll do is we will have a Boolean type variable. So we just declare it up here. That will be bool run. We'll set it to true. And then when SDL quit is triggered, we will set it to false and break out of the loop. Right? Then default, which means that any other type of event that occurs will result in a break out of this loop. Okay, that's all for this function. The next function, write a function that will paint the window a pale purple. So going back to our code now, this function, we will call it prepare frame. There's nothing being returned, so void and prepare frame, no parameters, so void again. And then within this function, we will call SDL set render draw color. And now we need to pass in the arguments. So app.renderer. And then the values for red, blue, green, right? As well as the transparency value. So this is going to be 96, 128, 255. And the alpha value or the transparency value is 255 as well, indicating we want an opaque color. Now, if you want to change this color, the simplest way is to go to Microsoft Paint and then click on Edit Colors and then select whatever color you like. You get the RGB values. You could then use them in your code. Okay. Then we call SDL render clear, passing in app.renderer. And that will paint our window for our rendering context. That's it. Next function, write a function to update the user screen once per frame. So going back to our code, this function again does not return anything, so void present frame is what we will call it. No parameters, so void there. And within this function, we will just call SDL render present, right? Passing in app.renderer. That's all for this function. The next function we need to write is to clean up and free resources. So going back to the code, we call this clear all. It's not returning anything, so void clear all, no parameters. So again a void there. Within this function, we will call SDL destroy renderer to clear up the memory occupied by the rendering structure. So app.renderer, and the same thing for our window. So SDL destroy window, passing in app.window. Right? We will also set app.renderer to a null pointer and app.window to a null pointer as well. And then we will call SDL quit to shut down the subsystems. Okay. Now we've written so many functions, we need to call these functions, right? And so we'll have a main function. Let's now go and create that function. So our main function, as you know, in C and C++ always returns an integer. Arguments will be int type argc char star arg v. In this function, we start with a memset function, which will initialize the memory occupied by our structure, that is app, right, 0, and then of course size of app. Then we will call initialize. After that, we will use @exit and then use the clear all function here to clear up or clean up memory before exiting the program. Now we'll have a while loop. While run is true. Within that, we will call get input and then call prepare frame and present frame, right? We put in an SDL delay of just maybe half a second or less if you like, or more. That's it for this loop. Return 0. Okay, let's now run this. And there we have our window. Okay, that ends our session for today. Till the next session, take care. Bye.